supported by Invest India and Startup India. My name is Shri Raj Deshmukh, and I will be your host for this session. We would like to thank our session partner, Refinitiv, Gold partner, Reacta, Bronze partner, Onfido, and Knowledge partner, eBuy. We are now moving on to our next session on new fraud trends and cybercrime. I would like to introduce you to the moderator of this session, Dr. Karnika Seth, founding partner, cyber lawyer, and author of Seth Associates. Next, I would like to welcome the panelists, Mr. David Sheth, Managing Director, Asia Pacific, Ultimaco, Mr. Vice President, Asia Pacific, DTC, Mr. Monish Salot, co-founder at Think360.ai, and Mr. Serge Boone, Technical Director, APJ, co-founder, Reacta. We welcome all of you. I would request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the panel will address a selected few at the end of the session. Over to you, Dr. Karnika.
Thank you so much. I guess the topic today is very interesting for this panel. It's cyber crimes and cyber threats, the emerging cyber crimes and emerging cyber threats. And we are definitely in the midst of very challenging and unprecedented times where the criminals specifically have, taken over cyberspace in such a way that whether it's dark web or, it's technologies like deepfakes or fake news or, issues and trends have emerged, especially during the last COVID and the lockdown times. So how is the entire landscape globally being affected? What are the top trends we hope to cover today, the top cybercrime trends, and the issues like, cybercrimes like ransomware or malware attacks or social engineering attacks, the phishing attacks, and, so on and so forth. You'll be curious to know from our panelists today, what are these emerging trends and how they're impacting the industry? Is the industry ready? Is the technology security regime robust enough? And are our law enforcement regimes really geared to deal with these challenges? So today, when we talk about cyber crimes, the dimensions have completely changed. The dynamism has completely changed. And if we look at the statistics in India itself, in the last, COVID times, 86% is the rise of cyber crimes. And if you see the kind of, trends in globally, even the Interpol has reported, there have been, just in a quarter of Jan to April, this is 2020, I'm talking about, 9 lakh spams and more than 48,000 malicious URLs were reported in that quarter itself. So you can imagine the kind of issues which have emerged, specifically data thefts. And the current forecast, if you look at the 2025 forecast, more than 10.5 trillion USD loss is what is expected. So mind you, this is something that we are dealing with. And whether it's phishing or it's ransomware or it's data harvesting malwares or malicious domains, fake links, misinformation, or deepfakes, use of AI-powered weapons in the cyber warfare, or 5G, attacks, which are IoT-based attacks or cloud jacking, many kinds of cyber crimes have emerged during this period. Let me just very briefly tell you about cyber warfare. When we talk about weapons, supersonic weapons, AI-enabled weapons are the order of the day, whether it's, countries like Russia or China, or, I would say N number of countries have been reported in the news to have used these, deployed these kind of weaponry, and remote sensing AI-based technologies being deployed, and also data poisoning, machine learning attacks during use of, or while using the data poisoning techniques, and targeted attacks. So that is something which is emerging trend in the cyber warfare domain, whether it's Stuxnet or it's, the earlier Estonia attacks. Today, the changing dimensions are going to really be something which we have as mankind not even thought of. So that's something we will be talking about. In India itself, there were reports of transport sector being attacked. Certain reported this, and as a part of cyber warfare, the law also provides, certain sections, Section 66F, specifically if there is a use of terrorism or other kinds of jeopardizing the critical infrastructure of a country, which is information security, where power grids are being using the IT-based systems, remote systems. If those are jeopardized, the punishments go up to life imprisonment. So that's something the law also provides for, but is the enforcement very smooth? That is going to be the talk of the day also during our discussion. But let me just move on to ransomware. Many kinds of malicious attacks using phishing, wishing, or smishing are the order of the day, using SMSs, voice over IP, or attachments which are malicious. And whether it is locker ransomware or crypto ransomware, whether it only encrypts the entire hard disk or it only encrypts the system, is what is being seen in the industry. Locky or WannaCry, few of the examples, but there's Petya, which encrypted the entire hard disk out. And many kinds of ransomware have floated and affected huge industries today. Then we see data thefts. Data thefts have risen phenomenally. In India itself, we've seen more than 2 million USD loss in the last 1 or 2 years. And if we see data theft, the whole way it works, PDP is still in the pipeline, the personal data protection bill. So the legal regime is also facing a turmoil. And we see that every day in the papers today. The new rules of IT are into play, the digital media rules are coming into play, and the various, whether it's social media or other industries, they are being affected and they need to comply. So those are the challenges we are facing today in the industry. Air India attacked, loss of, lot of customers' data, whether it's Domino's or Unacademy, Big Basket, or Just Dial. Crores, 10 crores or more people affected, their data is affected, and it's something as a challenge, posing as a challenge for every single industry today, because everything is automized, everything is digitized in today's world. And when it comes to payment app frauds, whether it is any app which is being used today, those are interesting issues. For example, if there is a remote desk-based attack, many times there are modus operandi is the criminal will send a link, ask the OTP, also directly to the customer. First, he'll take in the customer to a phishing link. The link opens, and sometimes the entire surveillance, I would say, it's like a hijacking of the device, and then entire thing, whether it's net banking or it's an app based OTP or the bank details in the app, everything gets the money gets siphoned off unauthorizedly. Again, law that does provide provisions for hacking, but how many people really know they can report crimes on cybercrime.gov.in and lodge a complaint? How many people really have the awareness to approach the law enforcement, have the electronic evidence saved, and then go for redressal? They don't know there's compensation available. They don't know about banking ombudsman and the the nodal officers which are there in every bank. Should they block the credit card? Should they block their debit cards? These are the challenges every common man faces, and therefore the need for trainings. We'll go on to all these issues. Let me now begin the panel discussion with Mr. I would say, we should just start with Deval first. Let's just hear from him on the top trends of cybercrime. Over to you, Deval.
Okay, thank you, Karnika. Yeah, I mean, we are living in an increasingly digital world and a pandemic world, right? And, while we are all struggling with the pandemic, the governments and organizations have had their hands full also by creating, by combating cybercrime. So if you look at it, in the last year alone, cyber heist operators have created a vast fortune to the tune of $6 trillion. $6 trillion. That was the volume of the cybercrime attacks last year. If you look at this total amount, right, it is equal to a country's GDP. And actually, it is only next to the income of US and China, right? So as technology keeps evolving at a rapid pace, right, so do cyber crooks. And we have new forms of cyber threats. The old tricks are still continuing. Yeah, and people are making a combination of these tricks and creating new mechanisms of cybercrime and frauds, right? We have emerging technologies which are coming up. The mobile phone has also been a very mass used device, right? With all of this, right, we have various topics such as data breaches, phishing, cyber activism, which are really a challenge in today's world. So if you kind of clearly look at cyber crime threats or cyber crime trends, right, which target governments, which target organizations, which target individuals, right? I mean, I would like to put forward a few. One of the top trends or top attacks remain phishing, right? It could be pure phishing or it could be spear phishing. Another one would be malware, which includes, of course, your viruses, worms, trojans, right? The third is, ransomware, right? I mean, this is also increasingly becoming a big issue, right? You have also account takeover and credential issue, right? I mean, business email, we have heard this type of fraud, or we've heard this type of cybercrime happening for several years. A CEO fraud is still extremely common even in today's day and age. Denial of service attacks. We have web application. We still have SSL encrypted threats. We have, we are moving towards API transaction based. We are moving towards API banking. We are moving towards API trends in various IoT technologies as well. So we are still having a lot of threats around that area as well, which are very targeted. One of the most common threats, which is still not gone away, is the insider threat or the data altercation by employees themselves, right? With increased outsourcing, with increased remote working, right? This has surprisingly emerged as a threat, right? And, of course, the zero-day attacks, which is, the publicly known vulnerabilities, they still kind of exist. So while we assume that these are the threats which are there, we may assume that it may only be happening with, let's say, a certain set of population when we look at age demographics. But actually, that's not the case. It's not that people in their 50s and 60s are the ones who are impacted by it. You have a lot of people right from millennia, right? Right from the millennials who are joining the internet, who are joining newly created jobs and organizations, right? So you have these problems across all age groups, right? And which is where, some of these things are happening on a consistent basis, right? So as we kind of are living in this, increasing digitized world, how do we as responsible stakeholders work with each other, work with governments, work with various agencies so that we are able to combat these threats and fraud risks that we face on a day-to-day basis is a very, very critical area that we need to address too, right? We have increasingly newer technologies which are coming up, right? We have AI coming up, we have smart cities coming up, we have smart grids coming up. The penetration of cell phone is really increasing. So for example, last year, just from Android platform alone, we had 10 million threats which kind of happened, right? So if you look at all of these topics, right, it presents a challenge in front of us where it needs a serious investment, it needs a serious planning, and it also needs some foresight, right, where we can combine various technologies that are available. We can combine physical security and info security principles, combine modern technology options, and at the same time be aware as a consumer or as a responsible corporate citizen ourselves so that we can combat these frauds. So I would urge everybody to look into these topics, right? Because this is an increasing problem which all of us will be facing through as we go
Very
ahead.
rightly said. They will, I think, points well taken. I think very important, the kind of crimes which have emerged. And I also want to add here, man-in-the-middle attacks, are also on the rise, and a number of companies don't really talk on phone, and it's all through emails, the invoicing, and the money goes to an X location, which is, implanted by a hacker, and many of these cross-border frauds have risen specifically during COVID times also. And apart from that, problems relating to not just data or data corporate assets or information security assets, but also IP frauds and piracy of even source codes and the source code thefts. Then cyberbullying, cyber trolling, cyber defamation are some of the areas which also need to be mentioned here, because they are also one of the emerging top cyber crimes across the world. And let's now move on to Serge. Why don't you, Serge, I think throw some more light on these ransomware attacks in particular, because I think this is one of the top 3 problems of cybercrime today.
Yep. Thank you, Karnika. So the thing about ransomware is that we are looking at a obviously increased rise, and if you look at how the modus operandi of all the ransomware hacking crew, you see a very huge change in the mentality. It is no longer a negligence, impact of a negligence, but it's really a very carefully and crafted, a kind of from social engineering to maybe phishing. And the first stage of the attack is not the ransomware. So the ransomware is probably a tip of the iceberg. It's a smoke screen. And many a times the ransomware crew is looking at a re-entry. All right, so if you look at the amount of impact that is on a global basis from, let's say, year 2018 to 2020, we're looking at, about more than 2 times, from $8 billion of estimated cost lost to ransomware until last year, as estimated of 20 billion in US dollar, by the way. But this amount is tremendous. And of course, if you look at how the ransomware crew operates, there is a lot of thinking into the process of crafting specialized targeted information just to target specific organizations. So what that means to us as laymen is that firstly, we have to be extra careful. And in certain cases, we're not usually tuned to that kind of level of scrutiny whenever we accept an email or look at an attachment or even download applications. So laymen are just laymen. It is very difficult for us as laymen to understand that there may be hidden threats or maybe hidden malwares or even ransomware in those normal applications or what seemingly to be normal. So the awareness is important, but also when you look at how it impacts our life, it is tremendous. For example, previously, if you look at maybe 10 years ago, a ransomware is just an unfortunate result of somebody clicking on a document and his PC and his valuable photos with his family is encrypted. So that the implication is about the person's or an individual or even a family's life, but it is not life endangering. But if you're talking about the recent attacks that we have, let's say for healthcare, in the healthcare industry, that affects life. What if an X-ray machine suddenly stops working? What if the patient's records get lost? Who are they, getting this remediation from? The only one that can give them the decryption key is, the ransomware crew. So there's always this debate of, if my data is encrypted, should I pay for it? Of course, from a law enforcement agency's perspective, you should not, fund the ransomware crews and the attack groups. But from the customer's perspective, there is always this dilemma. If my patient's healthcare record is encrypted and I can not get, this data decrypted, that means lives may be lost, diagnosis may be delayed, or even, pre-existing conditions may be worsened. And also on critical infrastructure, if the critical infrastructure has been crippled based on the ransomware attack, the consumer lives will be impacted as well. And more than that is the confidence level of the citizen, every single citizen, on the stability of the security of the country. So that have a lot of implications. From 10 years before until now, we see more and more implications of ransomware attack. So looking at the cost is one thing, but we also want to look at, from a more holistic view, is what are the implications of this attack and the results of it. There is no easy answer and a silver bullet for it. But I think as we work progressively to handle the ransomware threats, the consideration is also to help our layman fellows and friends to be able to get more and more aware of such a threat and where to look for help if unfortunately they are a victim of such threats.
Very rightly put. So this is awareness and training. The common man, how he needs to be well equipped in terms of information and prevent frauds like these. I think it's a point where well appreciated here, because we are talking about social engineering attacks next, because social engineering is majority of crimes which have arisen specifically by use of malware are due to social engineering, whether it is social media based implanted at email attachments having malware, or it's social media based criminals or fake accounts where they try to attack gullible people, or if it's trojans or viruses sent through phishing fake websites, banking frauds because of that, or any kind of OTP hijacking or financial data taken by the criminals by duping the innocent individuals. Now we come on to directly we'll be talking about malware attacks, and Ashish, may I request you to just talk about this in detail?
Yeah, thanks very much, Karnika. And I think the fellow panelists have really covered the ground quite well in terms of the trends. And I think Serge talked about the ransomware threats, which is so pertinent in today's context, right? You keep hearing these kind of things. I think malware is something, in any case, if I step back and I talk about ransomware is in any case one type of a malware, right? It's a malicious software. Historically, ransomware used to be, okay, the ransomware would enter the, a particular system and just encrypt the data. Nowadays, the modus operandi has changed. The criminals would like to have a double hook on the victims. What they would do is they would not only encrypt the data, but before encrypting the data, they would exfiltrate the data so that they can actually do cyber extortion from two ways, right? One is that not letting you get access to your data, and second is actually coming back to you and say, if you do not pay up, this data would be disclosed widely in public or dark web forums, or, in any case, this so-called conducive environment that is created because of the anonymity in the cryptocurrency side, which is Monero coins as an example. Bitcoin is not a great example for anonymity, but Monero coin is. And you look at dark web as a fertile ground for criminals to operate with anonymity again. There is a reason why this industry, this bad industry is flourishing. And this bad money is being created. So coming to malware, I think one of the things that we do observe, and we do a lot of cyber investigations at Entity, we actually published this report called Global Threat Intelligence Report. Through that report, we observed that the malware is really kind of changing. We do see different type of malware, whether it could be cryptocurrency miners, it could be Trojans, it could be command and control malware, where not only the nefarious activities are carried out for once, but actually the cyber criminals would like to contain and persist access to the customer environments or victim environments so that they can actually be there for either for monetary gains, which is financial motives, or it could be for more stealthier motives like espionage, or that even could lead to sabotage at times from an operational technology perspective, which is often forgotten thing. People think about, it's a air-gapped environment. I don't need to worry about my industrial control system, but that notion is gone for a long time already, right? So if you talk about malware, I think one of the things that we also observe is malware is really changing. So just having the the technology tools to detect signature-based technology kind of detection for malware detection doesn't really work. I think a lot of you have talked about challenges that the victims face, the organizations face, the customers face. I would like to actually touch quickly upon some solutions, especially with respect to malware. Obviously you need to have identification of your assets. You have to put preventive control in place. But extremely important today is having that mindset of assumed breach, or having that mindset of zero trust as well, right? Where you need to have very strong detection and response controls built into not only your endpoints, but in your cloud assets, also your network assets from a visibility perspective to detect these threats quickly and then respond to them effectively. So from a malware, prevention perspective or response perspective, we work with a lot of customers to not only detect these kind of, bad activities in their network from an anomaly detection standpoint, right? Because signature-based technology may not really help. By design, the bad guys would want to modulate or mutate in today's term, right? Mutation is a very common word in COVID-19 parlance. So this mutation happens by design so that the malware may not be detected. And hence, extended detection and response and technologies like that can really help. One of the things that I'll also add is having that secure by design and shift left approach. It's always easy to really look back and say, okay, this could have been done better. But I think if you really ensure that your security controls are imbibed right from the start at the initiation stage, that's what we call shift left, not to implement security controls at a later stage at an exponential cost, but actually implement them at an early stage. And then obviously, like I said, detection and response goes a very, very long way to not only prepare organizations better to handle such things when things go sideways, but also make sure that the reputation is protected, because you may actually recover your money from a cyber insurance from a recovery and remediation perspective, or those kind of things, but you can't really get your reputation back from a cyber insurer payouts.
Very rightly put. I think this is something that we and all members today would like to hear more about, because prevention is the key, due diligence is the key moving forward in today's times, where businesses concentrating on business resilience and aggregating and I would say accumulating all the acumen, whether it's asset related or it's security related or it's intelligence or their manpower trainings. I think everything has a role to play in preventing frauds in the new times to come. So one of the key areas which really we need to talk about today is the AI, because artificial intelligence is being deployed across various sectors, whether it is data analytics or machine learning, using of the same in making more sense out of data, making more productivity, in bringing more productivity and I would say more profits to any organization by creating and cutting down the operational costs and bringing more meaningful data, for use of businesses. AI is also being used across cyber warfare, as we talk about drones or we talk about any kind of weaponry. And there is a plus point and there is a flip side of we need to be cautious of. There is a dangerous side to it as well. So let's talk about this. Manish, why don't you throw some light on how AI is, going to play a role in making more sense out of businesses and how we can leverage its value today.
So yeah, it's AI is a very wide kind of universe, and different actors are actually using it in different ways. If you look at banks, NBFCs or fintechs or other institutions are actually using it to curb anti-money laundering efforts, where when they onboard customers, they are literally trying to check whether this is an identity fraud or not. They are not letting rouge actors come into systems by employing face matching techniques, by employing liveliness oriented techniques, so that you do not have identity fraud or identity being taken over. Similarly, AI is also being employed to kind of create attacks. It is, as the gentlemen on the panel have already mentioned, the malware attacks as well as ransom attacks. These are using AI capabilities, and they are trying to figure out the chinks in the armor of the technology architecture that a company or a individual company would put in. So there are various ways in which companies can literally fight back. There are internal cyber warfares, kind of I would say techniques that companies could employ, where they could create experiments where they could call external agencies to literally kind of come and hack their systems to kind of see what kind of possibilities can emerge, because AI keeps on learning, and unless you have this technique where you are trying to attack, reverse engineer your systems, it's impossible to kind of keep on stopping those attacks. So while AI and all the systems are kind of evolving, and they are being used in different schemes, I would like to just briefly talk about a case study that happened, which impacts the entire which impacts the entire conversation, like the Chinese lending app scam that happened. There were that it impacted the entire ecosystem, right? There were different actors, your regulators, from RBI perspective, your Google, your payment networks, that happened, and finally the consumers. So the cybercrime, when it happens, and when it happens at such a large scale, there are learnings for all the actors. Um, they're learning for all the actors, for them to kind of prepare themselves. How could these actors get access to the payment ecosystem of India, and kind of launder so much money? Finally, all that money is apparently now being laundered through crypto assets and going out of the country. So these are the pertinent things that need to be looked upon. While AI can fight on things that you can anticipate and forecast, but there is a larger conversation that also need to be had in terms of your payment infrastructure, your regulations, your laws. How do they allow these rules actors to come in and play with your formal organizations?
I think that's interesting to know, Manish. There's huge dimensions to AI and how we can actually make full use of this technology, and it's there to stay. Definitely, it's there to grow, and it's being deployed across various sectors, whether it's cybersecurity or it's anything else. We all have immense value to be derived from there. So moving on to very interesting question. Generally, in such panel discussions is the UPI frauds. There's huge number of people who are being impacted by the same, and if you see the payment, frauds, this is one of the key areas. Common man, is duped, and very easily. I mean, when we see these kind of cases every day, there are number of cyber crimes which are happening, and a lot of queries come. And then what are the kinds of problems? Because when somebody opens an account, whether it's aligning the UPI with a particular payment wallet, people don't understand that they don't need to share their financial, I would say, data, whether it is OTP or it is any kind of QR code. So QR code frauds are on the rise. And very interestingly, I dealt with one of the cases where, a doctor was recently duped by somebody in West Bengal, a criminal, where the link was just sent, and that link was sent for KYC purposes by a phone call, when the doctor said, the doctor was informed that the mobile connection will be lost if they don't do the KYC right away. And she, under a panic, because all the patients would contact, on that, so just logged on to that phishing site. And from there, the phone was hijacked. Entire thing was hacked. Whatever was being typed, whether it is her UPI details or OTPs, money worth maybe 2.5 lakhs was siphoned away within 5 minutes. And now in such a situation, what is to be done? So obviously, blocking of the, immediately contacting the bank, blocking the, debit cards, blocking the entire account transactions, contacting the relationship manager, contacting the police, contacting the mobile phone company from where this phone came. If it was an X company, that needs to be informed as well. Logging on a complaint on cybercrime.gov.in immediately, keeping all these screenshots of evidence for investigation purposes is very important. So everything has a role to play. So vigilance, the general awareness and training, lack of training and awareness is a huge problem today, because there's lack of reporting. And many people don't know there are cyber police stations across every district now. There's technical help available, and by contacting the the mobile provider, the details of who has taken that phone number can be obtained. Criminals are again very, very clever. So if they're putting a phishing site or putting a fake account, they are using VPNs and they're using a lot of other hidden software to actually camouflage their IP addresses, MAC addresses as well sometimes. So a lot is happening in the dark web. And this is an area which I think every common man needs to be aware of, because payments are being largely circulated through payment apps and UPI today. So whether it's a small amount or sending money to a village, or by a driver or by a worker, somebody, everything. So whether it's a small amount or a big amount, these transactions are happening through the UPI and through the payment apps. So training is very important area. And in touching this aspect, I would like to bring, I think they will hear the trainings and awareness is so essential, not just for a common man, but for everyone today, whether it's industries or it's corporations or corporate bodies. Why don't you, they will just throw some light on that?
No, thank you. I think training and consumer awareness is very, very important. But there is also one fundamental change which needs to come from financial organizations too. Financial organizations need to, somehow treat fraud separately, and somehow they treat financial crime separately. I mean, somewhere this needs to converge, right? Because every bank, every fintech, every association has this write-off amount where they usually treat a financial crime as well. I think time has come to move out of that write-off amount and have these two converging, right? I think this is extremely important. I think with the new data privacy, at least if I'm talking from an India perspective, right? With the new data privacy bill, which is also going to be enacted, right? I think we will also see Data Regulatory Council coming into play, and we are also, we should hopefully have a lot of inter-ministry or interdepartmental reporting happening. So as a consumer, I would strongly suggest, right? I think you should be aware of, these common payment frauds like UPI. Don't do things like clicking on a suspicious SMS, or clicking on or mirroring your UPI on a TV or large screen like that, right? I mean, UPI app, because these are some of the common mistakes that a lot of consumers do. But at the same time, as we speak at IMAI, we are also kind of converging, with the new. We are a lot of us fellow members, organization participants, right? We are forming a self-regulatory and a self-governance council, right? And we are at the same time, we will set up a trust score, right? Which each and every organization will have to have, as in how we evolve in this journey of financial security and cyber security, right? So as we speak, we have a RegTech Council, a RegTech committee, right? Wherein we would be taking across best practices from the industry, from a regulatory perspective. We will be asking members to adopt these modern technologies, to also start reporting them, right? Because reporting also becomes very important. Like a lot of my fellow panelists have shared, reporting becomes important. And then finally, we would want to collaborate with the various stakeholders. It could be the RBI, it could be the DOT, it could be the Ministry of IT, or it could be the Data Regulatory Council in the future, right? Wherein we are able to come up with a standard, safe set of practices and policies and must-haves that every organization should have. Because last year, if you look at the data points alone, almost 75% of the attacks in Asia Pacific were successful, right? So we as a group spend a lot on digitization. IMI is a lot about digitization. So I would encourage to this panel, I would encourage IMI to publicize this so that more and more people can join the group, more and more people can be aware, and we can make a digital society a much safer place to work and to transact in. Yeah, thanks.
I think that's a very interesting point, because we do appreciate that there is need for convergence. I recall that once there was a government order saying that rather try order saying that there could not be more than 200 SMSs sent per day on phone. And that was easily bypassed on the net, because that is something which is, the technology allows, and the SMSs were going through the net. So it is time in the day where, convergence is not only achieved, by interministerial or I would say inter cooperation with private industry, but also synchronization of efforts on all accounts, whether it is legal enforcement, police acting on its own, or the judiciary, the need for special courts to hear the cybercrime cases. There is also a need to converge the policy, whether it is data theft or other issues which are emerging. So data protection is a common area of concern, not only from the policy side, but also implementation, because it has to be practicable and something which is enforceable and acceptable across industries from all time points. And then that also is something that needs convergence. And at this point, cybersecurity policy, the national cybersecurity policy, looking at that and how Digital India and smart cities will all converge, efforts of policy, implementation and enforcement, and to combat cross-border frauds, more cooperation through international bodies, which we can have, so that we can prevent fraud, not just at the national or local level, but internationally. We are faced with these challenges today. And coming back to smart cities, I just want to talk about this a little bit more with Serge here. Ransomware attacks are on the rise. You touched on that aspect, and very connected with that is a question I can see in the chat box talking about whether how smart cities we can avoid and we can prevent these attacks, specifically ransomware and or IoT based attacks. Would you like to throw some light on this, Serge?
Yeah. So in a smart city, there is always this use of IoTs and most often OT devices. So these OT devices, well, there's a fortunate and unfortunate aspect. The fortunate thing is that they, besides built application where these devices do not run any arbitrary code. So from that perspective, it's really difficult to have a ransomware that runs on these devices. But the unfortunate part is they're all connected. So depends on whether these devices are connected to an IT environment and uses this IT environment to manage it. So the ransomware could actually happens on the IT, therefore crippling these services. Just for example is if you have a red light system that connects to, let's say, the road transport ministry, and they often use an IT system to manage all these red light systems. But if those PCs or those servers are compromised, and worse still, as a result of ransomware, it is crippled, that means that for the whole district or even the country's traffic light system is not going to work. So that has a lot of implication, especially when these devices are getting smarter. But at the same time, because of the smarter trends and also the characteristics of the devices, they are always need to have some kind of connection to either a place where they take instructions from or a place where they feed information to. Talking about these kind of devices that has a danger of encryption when a ransomware attack happens. On the other side, there is also another dimension of ransomware that we're looking at. Not so much about encrypting the data, but it's more about a distributed denial of services on, let's say, a device, a critical device. If you have a nuclear plant that relies on specific devices to operate and regulate the temperature, and if there is a denial of service to that device, we can imagine, what is the result of that. So we're not encrypting the data, but we are actually holding it ransom, right? So the ransomware crew will have another dimension to practically work on, and that is denial of service. So the result is the same. It's using it as a ransom, holding the government agencies or even the critical infrastructure for a certain amount of money before they release that denial of service. Yep. So there are different aspects that we look at, but more and more we will see, and it is expected to have different kinds of attack vectors, the different kinds of modus operandi for OT environment as we progress to a smart city environment.
Okay.
If I may just add, Karnika, on that what Serge mentioned, right? Especially with respect to IoT, I think we also should talk about industrial IoT, which is IIoT, right? And when you look at from a 5G rollout perspective, the threat landscape and threat attack surface is going to multiply many-fold, where this problem can really go out of hand. While there are obviously a lot of advantages with 5G in terms of latency reduction and the bandwidth and everything else, but I think if right set of controls and policies are not set properly at the right time, this is a situation that can really get out of hands, because this will provide a very large attack surface and a lot of devices to come online. And hence there is the importance of secure by design from a policy as well as from a control standpoint.
Well taken point. Ashish, can you just in bullet points say 3 points which we need to take in terms of cyber security in the roadmap ahead? So 3 points quickly, just bullet points, Ashish, and bullet points by Manish, and I'll wrap up the discussion of that.
Sure. So I think if I am given 3 bullet points, I would just say that first of all, the organizations and the government functions need to really understand what their assets are. This is at times a very boring topic, but I can tell you, having done a lot of investigations, this is extremely critical topic to know what you have and what is the criticality of that information. That's one. Second topic I would say is very important for you to have right level of visibility, understanding what your organization does, how the traffic flows are, how the data flows from one thing to another, how your third parties connect to your system, so that you can have good level of visibility, and basis that visibility you can then identify anomalies from a detection standpoint. And last but not the least, I definitely would recommend organizations to invest heavily on building response capabilities, because obviously it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And it is critically important that organizations prepare themselves rather than feel sorry when things go wrong.
30 seconds, Manish.
Yeah, I think Ashish has added a lot of it. I think there is something, if I would want to add, I would like to add that actors that come in, like right now we have big tech like Google, etc., kind of asking us to do a lot of stuff, where players like Dream11 are not allowed to host themselves while they are regulated, and other root players are allowed. So these big techs, which are a big distribution channel, they also need to be kind of taken into account into our thought process because it impacts the consumers as a whole.
Okay, very interesting. I think this discussion has been very, very interesting for all the members here, and we as panelists have really enjoyed the whole session. But I'd like to just conclude by saying that what I gather from here is that cybersecurity is a need of the hour, or we need to overhaul our budgets. We need to overhaul, I would say, what we have in terms of blueprint, not only in terms of the framework, which we all currently hold in terms of policy within organizations, but also revamp the deployment of tools and technologies and the trainings and manpower. So that's something which, as any organization in today's world, which is here to stay and grow, needs to do. And as a nation and as globally, what we need to do is bring in more think tanks, bring in more policy dialogue, look at policy not just from the point of view of the ink and paper mode, but see whether how implementable it is, whether how feasible it is, and understand the technical way in which organizations across the world work, whether it is social media networks or anything else, any kind of IT-based industry or organization, need to understand how they work to apply the law also. It has to have a two-way process. And not only that, I think the enforcement regimes need to align themselves, because we cannot have 3 compartments. It has to be, any kind of policy needs an implementation framework, it needs an enforcement framework, then only holistically multi-stakeholder approach can make any sense. So thank you all the panelists. I think we have touched on every area which really needed to be highlighted here. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all the viewers, and we hope to connect again very soon. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you so much, everyone, for an engaging discussion. And a special thanks to all our panelists and our moderator for being here with us today and making this possible. Another thanks goes out to all the attendees who are here with us today. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll be back in a while with the next session. Stay tuned.
Thank you.